Have you ever made a decision out of anger? All right. You don't have to give specifics, okay? But what was some of the outcomes of the decision made out of anger?
Not good.
Not good, but okay. But see, when I was in seminary and I had to write a paper, they would never let me get away with not good. But since we're not in seminary, I guess we can get it. But right, usually it's not a good thing, right? We say things, do things that we would normally go, man, I wouldn't do that. What was I thinking, right? And so the question then that I want us to think about is, remember, our main people so far that we're dealing with in Esther is Esther, Mordecai, and Haman, right? And Haman is the one who's got a problem right now. Remember, he thinks everything is about him. Because if you remember, we'll find out here in a moment, but he's consumed with Mordecai. He's consumed that he will not bow down to him. He's consumed with all these things. And then we're going to find out, if we get to those verses tonight, we'll find out just how consumed with himself he really is or was. So if you would, we'll go ahead and we're going to be in Esther chapter 5. We're going to be in verse 13. And in my Bible, these verses from verse 9 all the way to the end of the book, it's all about the pride of Haman, okay? So we're going to be in verse 13. Listen to what it says here. "And all of this does not satisfy me. Every time I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate." Have you ever met people that all they seem to do is suck the joy out of everybody? It can be, there's always got to be that, those people that it just seems like there's always going to be something wrong with something, even though everybody else, like, this is awesome, this is phenomenal. And here we see this whole idea is Mordecai has gotten all of his joy sucked out. Right? Mordecai is not happy because what? What's happening? Who won't bow down to him? Mordecai won't bow down to Haman. So his joy, by the way, a selfish, prideful joy, right? Because that's what it's all about. He is getting this. He is getting this whole thing sucked out of him. Now, if you remember, why was he joyous in this occasion? Do you remember why he was so joyous? Right, he was going to be right. He was invited to go with the king to eat. He was excited about this, right? And then there's that Jew sitting there. Literally, this is how derogatory he is towards Mordecai. He looks at him as just a horrible person because he will not bow down to this prideful man that thinks he deserves this honor. I have found throughout history, when you read about tyrants, okay. And make no mistake about this, if Haman would have become a leader, he would have been a tyrant. Okay? No, so when you read about tyrants, what are some characteristics of a tyrant? What do you think?
Very prideful.
Very prideful. What's that? Killer.
They're interested in themselves.
Interested in themselves.
Their way or no way.
Their way or no way, yeah. Never content. Right, so when I hear people talk about today, we love today to throw around that a political adversary is a tyrant, right? Again, people need to understand tyrants are way worse than anything we see in America right now. I said right now, okay? Because, well, everything you guys just said, that's the type of person a tyrant would be. And Haman would have been a tyrant if he could have, again, gotten away with this. So we know from these verses. In fact, I'm going to read a verse. We're going to read just a little more here. Go on here. Good verse 14. Kind of put these together. Then it says, "Then Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends said to him." First of all, do you always, if you're a tyrant or you're a very prideful person, who will you surround your life with? What's that? Yes, men, absolutely. People who are going to completely agree with you, okay?
Tell you what you want to hear.
Right, tell you what you want to hear. So he goes out, it says there, it says, Fred said to him, "Have a wooden gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask if the king can have Mordecai hanged on it." All right? And then it says, then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. And the advice pleased Haman, so he had the wooden gallows made. Can you imagine this for a moment? So, what's the gallows for in your front yard? Right? Mm-hmm. What you build those for? I mean, think about that. You know what? You know, people get upset with some of the stuff we put in our front yards now with homeowner association. Can you imagine them writing this paper going, get the gallows out of your front yard, right? Okay? But here's these gallows in the front yard. And if you notice here, what did it say here? And it says 50 cubits high. Guys, a cubit is roughly 2.5, 3 feet. We'll just go with 3. It might be a little too much, but the math is easy. Let's go with 2. The math is easier, okay? So we go with 2 foot just because this is a big. This is a bigger than a slide in your front yard, right? I mean, this is pretty tall object in your front yard, is it not? Right? So we got this huge thing in the front yard. I mean, in his out for everybody to see it. And then notice the conversation. And then his wife says, you know what, just build these gallows and just go to the banquet. I mean, that coldness, right? The coldness that is there. You know, just go do this. It's no big deal. And it's so, and again, a person who is always trying to fill their life with people patting him on the back, with the bigger paycheck, with the most friends, with the most, how do we put it, toys in their life, right? They're never satisfied, are they? They're not. Mordecai was part of the king's inner circle. I mean, he was friends with the king. He obviously, had access to basically whatever he wanted. And he was fixated on a person who wouldn't bow down to him. That's it. Fixated on Mordecai. He was not letting him go. So now we see this taking place. And now we have his wife, and his friends are like, oh, you know what? Oh, come on. Just this is what you need to do. And this will, in fact, this will make you feel better if you do this. Right? I mean, this is the type of friends that he is standing close to. Now, it's interesting here, and it's interesting that, first of all, we do know, remember when Jesus was hung on the cross? The Jews did not have the ability to hang Jesus on the cross. Okay? That's why the trial was before the Romans. The Romans were in charge. The Jews did not have the direct ability to say, we're hanging Jesus. Okay? Because who was in power? The Romans. The government of Rome was in charge. In fact, most of the Romans, they didn't care about the Jewish traditions, Jewish laws, because it didn't affect them at all. But yet, if they wanted to put somebody to death, they always had to get the permission from those in authority. So, we see here that he's going to build these gallows, right? He's going to build these gallows. He has spoken to the wisest people in the kingdom, his wife and his friends. Who says, let's build these 50 cubit high gallows. Let's use those so Mordecai can be hung on. Can you guys imagine how sickening this is? I want you to think about this for a moment, okay? Some of the worst people for torture to ever walk the face of this earth were right here where where this conversation is taking place. I mean, they're good at torture. Some native tribes were really good at torture here in America and in South America. Really good at torturing, and the whole point of torture is to slowly kill someone, and so now we see these gallows, which are really in theory what quick way to die compared to sitting on a pointed stick and just let it slowly skewer somebody that many of these people would do for torture. And other things would take place. Like a lot of native tribes, I don't know if you guys know this, now they put things just under their skin and hang people by their skin and pull off. I mean, those were true torture people. These guys here were more about, hey, let's get rid of this guy. We're going to do it by gallows. Now, what we're seeing here, though, is we're seeing Haman with some ability to do this because he has some ability, but yet there's some of the limits made. Did you notice the limit put upon him? He didn't have the ability just to go get Mordecai and say, I'm hanging you. Remember, just like the Jews could not say, Jesus, we're hanging you, or hanging you on the cross. They had to be brought before the Romans. They had to be found guilty. So, if you notice here, it says, you know what? Go joyfully. Don't you love that? Just go with the big smile on your face. Be excited about this banquet you're going to, because you know it's all about you after all, right? And you go in there, be excited, and say, King, can I have this guy Mordecai killed on the gallows? Oh, by the way, I already built him in my front yard. Okay, they already built in my front yard, so you have to worry about it, King. Now here's the deal. Oh, by the way, just so you know, I want you to imagine, just play head games for just a minute, okay? Can you imagine if Esther goes, oh, by the way, that's my uncle? Okay? I mean, you want to talk about a guy whose head's going to explode. I mean, here's poor Haman. I mean, he is just losing it because of what? What was his problem? Pride. That was his problem. Pride. That everything was about him. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be the way he said it was going to be. Everything had to be that way. And if you don't bow down to me, you're wrong, not me. Okay? And how do we know that? Because he wants to kill Haman over it. He wants to kill Mordecai over it, right? This is what we are taking here. Now, one of the things here is, again, since we have the ability to look forward, in the text, right? We do know from the text that Mordecai kind of hangs on the gallows, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And that Esther, the decree went out and the people said, we understand that. But I want us to notice something here. What if, just what if his wife goes, you know what, just go to the banquet, don't worry about it. Or his friends would have said, just go to the banquet. Don't worry about it. There would have been no gallows built in his front yard for him to be hung on. Did you notice that? Okay. So in our lives, have you ever had a time in your life where you took bad advice? Okay. All right. Now, bad advice is just that, bad advice, right? And sometimes it can get us into trouble. Sometimes it's nothing, right? But here's some, guys, I want you to think about this for a moment. It's interesting here is that if verse 14 didn't exist, there would have been no gallows. If they would have opened up their mouth and said, hey, build the gallows, why don't you do this? We agree, and all these things. There would have been no gallows for Haman to lose his life on, right? But again, he was listening to bad advice. Now, obviously, there's no way we can say that his wife and these people knew that they were going to have, be hung on those gallows. But I find it always interesting that because we get the ability to see the whole picture of the context of what is taking place. So he encourages them to do so. Do you guys realize they said, I saw this a couple of days ago, they said there's roughly 3%, and again, I'm just going to give you numbers. I'm not saying I agree with the numbers. I'm just going to tell you what's out there, okay? That roughly 3% of high school kids identify as transgender. 3%. And if you Google high school in America, there's about 4.3 million high school students in America, roughly, give or take, okay? That comes out to about 120-some thousand kids in high school who are transgender. Again, I know nothing about the study, the questions, all these different things, because that's something to remember about polls and questioning is what's surrounding them, okay? But I'm bringing this out because, guys, we live in an evil society, right? And for people to sit there and say that, these kids are this way or these adults are that way, and they don't think anything about the potential consequences, okay? They don't think about the mental part that they're playing with people. It is not normal to be something you're not, and we all know that. Okay? We all know that. And that is, and every person knows that. Because the fact of the matter is that we've got so messed up as a culture that we really are very in an inadvertent way teaching people that everybody must bow down to our will. And if they don't do it how I want to, adults are throwing 2-year-old temper tantrums. Did you guys know that? They're throwing 2-year-old temper tantrums all the time in our society, okay? Because they've never, ever been taught Sometimes there's a no. Okay, sometimes, and reminding it's not about you, right? It's about who? Us as a church pointing people to Jesus Christ. And as churches, let us never be prideful. Let us never be that way, because I don't want gallows in our front yard, us be then us hanging out on it. I don't want to do something that we'll regret after we do it because we were too prideful to think it through, to seek out the right advice. Because, by the way, we're supposed to go to God, but he also says to go to who? Come on, you know who the answer is. To godly people. Okay? Because, in theory, if they're godly, that means they're following God, right? I mean, that's the theory behind it. But it shouldn't be to the world first. It should never be to the world, actually. It should be to God first, then to one another. And ultimately going back to what does God say about it. And so here we see that he is so mad. Remember, he already wants all the Jewish people killed. And in his mind, he had every right to believe that the Jewish people need to be killed because this one Jew would not bow down to me. Okay? All right, so now we're going to find out that the joke's on him. Okay? We're going to find out that the joke's on him. And I think this is one of my favorite things that take place here with him and what they have to say. So if you would, go to chapter 6. Okay, we're going to look at verses 1 and 2 of Esther. All right? So his wife and his friends have given us this phenomenal advice. Go build some gallows in your front yard. Okay? And make sure they're tall enough so everybody can see them. All right, so here we go. Verses 1 and 2. During that night, the king could not sleep. It's never a good thing when a king can't sleep. Because a king is going to say, why can't I sleep? We need to figure out why I can't sleep. Okay? So it goes on here. So he gave an order to bring the book of records, the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found that what Mordecai had reported about Bigthan and Teresh, two of king's eunuchs, who were doorkeepers, that they had sought to attack King Ahasuerus. Now, I want you guys to see the irony here. Okay? I want you to see this. You have in chapter 5, you have everybody saying build gallows to kill Mordecai, right? And then we have this big dramatic turning point in the book of Esther here into chapter 6. Because into chapter 6, what we have here is that what we have is a complete shift from Haman, who is thinking that he's got all this power, rising to honor, and I'm successful, and I'm going to destroy Mordecai. I'm going to destroy the Jews, and I've got all these things going for me. The king likes me. I'm going to go to a banquet with the queen. There ain't no better place to be than you're an honored guest with the queen. And so he's all excited about this, and he's ready to go. So he would have been sleeping, by the way, probably between chapters 5 and 6, just like the king would have been sleeping here. But we see something here. He reminds us these things. Now remember, the queen wanted to do what? Do you remember what the queen wanted to do?
Everybody to fast and pray.
Right. She got the fast and pray. Now she got the answer, went before the king, Ahasuerus, went before him, and then what happened?
Put them on.
No, she had him do a banquet, right there at the banquet, and then she said, hey, let's come back, right? Okay, let's come back because I got something else I want to do. And now we read here in verses 1 and 2, the king can't sleep. So, of course, what all of us do, we just get out the encyclopedia and start reading the encyclopedia. Get outside reading the history books, right? Okay, this is what happens here. He says, hey, get the history books out here. Let's get all this stuff out so I can see what's going on. Okay? So this is literally what takes place. Now remember, when you read periodically throughout the Old Testament, there's going to be lines that say something to this effect. And those are all written in the annals of the kings of Israel or the kings of Judah. Okay? So they kept a very accurate record of the events that took place when kings were in charge. So this is no different here that we find out here in chapter 6 of Esther. So as we go through here, the king, in fact, let's go back to chapter 2, verse 21 for just a moment, okay? I want us to go back to this. It says, so we can see the event that we read about, that was read to the king in chapter 6. It says, in those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officials, those who guarded the door, became angry and sought to attack King Ahasuerus. Okay, verse 22. But the plot became known to Mordecai, and he informed Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. Esther didn't take credit for it, right? She said, this guy came to me, said, this is what these two people are planning, and we know that if we would have continued reading chapter 2, then we would have seen this taking place. So now all of a sudden, the king can't sleep. Now let's interject a little bit here. Why do you think the king can't sleep?
Oh, God.
Okay, somebody always has to give a spiritual answer. You guys ever notice that? Always. Okay, no, exactly correct. Because what was going to happen if this didn't take place? Yeah, absolutely, he's going to hang.
No, the Jews.
Yes, exactly. The Jews were going to be killed as well. So here we have this event taking place. So we can very much assume that God's playing very much playing the role in the king not being able to sleep. Okay, and so he is there. And can you imagine for a moment? I always find it interesting here. Do you think, is it possible that there's no answer here? I think that we can necessarily, with the definitive answer we come up with, do you think the king's going to remember Mordecai?
Yes.
Okay, what do you think? Okay, got yes. What else? Anybody else? I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just asking because we don't really know.
Well, it was in the king's court, so.
Mm-hmm. We don't know how long ago it was, right? I think that the king probably, if I'm going to lean one way or the other, I'm going to say he probably would have remembered once the name was written. Was spoken. Okay? Because if you remember chapter 2, it says that Esther told the king on behalf of Mordecai. Okay? Now again, that doesn't mean she said, "Oh, by the way, Mordecai sits at the gate." It's possible she said that. Right? It's very possible. But what we know for certain here is that the king couldn't sleep, and now he has the records read to him. Again, I would think that'd be a quick way to fall asleep. I'm just asking, okay? But obviously, this is not going to take place because, by the way, a lot of time has elapsed here. Okay, if you remember, it was years. It's been years since this took place. Okay, I'm not going to go decades, but years before this took place, because Queen Esther had to go through her cleansing. She had to go through all of her, all those things that they did. That took time, and now we have this taking place, and so now we see here what takes place. Now, does God change? No. Okay. So, if God spoke to people in visions and dreams, can God still speak to us in visions and dreams? Yes. Okay. But yet, if you were to say that God spoke to me in a vision and dream, most people would go, what? You're crazy. You're out of your mind. Yeah. Okay. This has been probably about 3 years ago. I told Jennifer this. It's about 2-3 years ago. I was asleep in the middle of the night. I heard something say this to me: "Wake up." And that's all it said. Wake up. I'm not saying that was God. I'm just saying that we've all had things, that we sense, we hear, right? And so now here's the king, the ruler, says, "I want to see these chronicles, right? I want to see the records of what I've done as king, what has happened while I was king, and so that we can have these things." Now, if you notice here, he is very, very interested in what's happening. He can't sleep and all these things happening. So the fact of the matter is that the king has something read to him that he can't forget. Now let's face it. If you knew or I knew that someone was going to try to kill us, and the only way we knew was because somebody stepped in and heard it, I think we'd be pretty thankful, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. I mean, again, if we knew, okay? So here is a case in which the king is like, whatever happened to this guy? Did you guys pick up that? Yeah, right, exactly. Haman's out there building gallows for him, right? I mean, obviously the king doesn't know at this point, but that's exactly what's happening. Okay, happened. The gallows are there, and it's interesting because we don't have any indication at this point of that the king completely understands the real meaning behind what Haman's trying to do. Okay? Because we
He's
know.
already signed the proclamation.
Yeah, right, exactly. He signed the proclamation. People have already panicked about it. Right, exactly. And so it's like, well, okay. But that doesn't mean, you know what, Dave? It doesn't mean I can't be nice to this Jewish guy before we kill him. All right? Think about it for a moment. Yeah, he didn't know some of these things.
Thinking of was Jewish.
Exactly, that's right. He was not. Exactly. Just like he wasn't thinking of Esther being Jewish. Right? But none of these things were taking place.
Well, at that point, he didn't know Mordecai was the one that saved his life.
Exactly. Right. Because he's, whatever happened to this guy? Exactly. Right. Exactly. So he says, we're going to have to fix that. Now remember, if you or I are in a position to fix a wrong, we should. Okay? So here is a wrong that needs to be fixed. So verse 3 of chapter 6 says this. Then the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. Nothing. All right? Can you imagine for a moment, you're the king. And maybe he thought that his lower officials would do something nice for the guy. Right? We don't know. But they did nothing for him. And I believe, I think whoever said it, that God has him awake here on purpose. He's awake on purpose. He needs to see these things on purpose. I mean, the name Mordecai has very much already been, presented to the king, because we know that she did it on behalf of Mordecai. Now, whether or not she spent, I guess we're assuming that the name was mentioned. So here we see this there. Remember, the same Mordecai who wants to kill, Haman, who wants to kill Mordecai, who wants to kill all the Jews, is now getting ready to have a banquet before the king, who has built gallows. Guys, you can't write any more soap opera than this. Okay? This has got Young and the Restless big time beat. Okay? All right. So here we have this. Here we have this taking place. So what can we? There's a few things I want us to think about. There was no reward given out, right, from the king to Mordecai for saving his life. So there's a couple of things I want us to learn, a few things I want us to learn and to think about. The right thing to do by the king is to reward Mordecai. Okay? Better late than never, right? But it is the right thing to do. And so this is what he's going to do. And since he knew that there wasn't anything that had taken place, it would have been written down, right? There would have been somewhere, somebody would have known something that, hey, yeah, we gave the guy who knew Mercedes-Benz, okay? Something, there would have been something written there that took place. So again, there was a right thing to do. And that's something we need to remember. Also, too, the king needs to be. Okay, you can have two types of kings. What are they? Good and bad king. Okay, all right. So if you're a good king, what are some things you might do?
Care for your people.
Okay, care for your people. That's probably the biggest thing that you could do. And here we have seen that he has not done that to them. Now, mind you, he had big parties for the officials. But not for everybody, right? That's the whole thing with Esther and got into power and Vashti and all that. But we need to remember that. Now, the second thing here is verse 3. It's reminding him. It says, nothing has been done for this Mordecai. Nothing. There in verse 3. And so it says, I love this. It says, was there dignity given to him for this? Was there honor giving him for this? There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And this is why the king has to do so. Now as we look at this, we don't necessarily know anything about how Mordecai would have potentially acted. Let's look at verses 4 and 5. Okay? This is what it says. So the king said, who is in the courtyard? Who is in the courtyard? Now Haman had just entered the outer courtyard of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the wooden gallows which he had prepared for him. Like I said, there's nothing, there's soap operas can't beat this stuff, I'm telling you. All right? He's out there, the king is like, man, we're gonna take care of Mordecai. And Haman's walking, he goes, I want to kill Mordecai. Okay? And so, and he goes on here, he says, so the king's servant said to him, behold, Haman is standing in the courtyard. And the king said, have him come in. King, what do you think Haman's thinking right now?
Reward.
What's it? Reward. Right. Bring him on in here. And since the king likes me, what did they say? You might as well strike while the iron's hot. Right? King likes me. I mean, even though I have no clue that he's going to look at me and say, hey, go reward this guy who I hate. Okay? And that's what's going to happen. I hate this guy. Because you don't love somebody who likes somebody if you want to kill him. You know what I'm saying? So he hates this guy. Right? And so he wants him gone. And so he's coming in there. He's all excited about this, and he's looking at this. And so he is thinking, oh man, this is yet another good thing for me. Remember, that's what prideful thought will do. Right? Prideful thinking will have us believe it's about me. Prideful thinking will make us say this way. So now we have this king. Now, one of the greatest ways, or dangers I should say, is if you or I are prideful, right? And somebody is in power, and we think that they're going to do something for us, because up until this point, everything has been about us, or at least we think it's been about us. And all of a sudden we're coming in because, we're coming back for another banquet, right? And we're coming back in, so it's about us. We're coming back in, and all of a sudden we see the king, he's speaking, and the king wants me to come in. Now remember, hey, it's about me anyway, so I'm good. The king wants to see me, all these things. And so the second thing we see here, the second thing we have to understand something here is when you or I have no idea that the questions, the reasoning behind questions from somebody in authority are there, we should be very careful how we answer those questions. Okay? Now, look what happens here. Verse 6 says, Haman came in to the king and said to him, what is it to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor? What is it? What do you want me to do to this guy? Who is it? Because who's he thinking it is? Himself. Okay, himself. So he goes on. He says, this is what you need to do, king. I'm going to paraphrase here, but here's what you need to do, king. Have them bring a royal robe with the king has worn. That we might even have the smell of the king on it. You know what I'm saying? Something may have rubbed off, right? That we can have this here. And then has ridden the horse which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal turban has been. Man, I'm going to get everything on me. I'm going to get all the smells, all the excitements of the king. I'm going to go ride on his horse. I'm going to have all these things. Okay? We knew a person many, many years ago. He called me one day, and his exact words were, hey, I have a car. And my car that I have, I need to get it from my house to town. How do you guys remember Fred Flintstone?
No.
Okay, this was a Fred Flintstone car. And I'm not exaggerating. There was a hole in the driver's seat on the floor. Okay? And I said, what's the big rush about it? He goes, John Wayne rode in it. Okay? I don't know, can you still smell him? Is his DNA? I don't know. Right? But he thought, well, the car would be worth something because John Wayne rode in the car. Now, that might be more realistic if it was, the jumpsuit that Evel Knievel, rode on his body, whatever. But here we kind of have this same thing. You know what? I mean, the king, I want to ride on the same horse that the king did. I want to have the same outfit on that the king. I want to have all these things that the king had on, right? This is what he's literally saying here. Why? Because he thinks it's about him. Okay? This is what I want. This is what I think is going to happen here. And he even put his turban on, all these things. Then order them to hand the robe and the horse over to one of the king's noble officials, and have them dress the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, so it shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor. Guys, these are some funny verses. Okay? You've got a prideful man who's going to have to walk around going, hey, so shall it be done to the man whom the king desires on. He goes, but it's supposed to be me. Because that's what pride will do to us. That's what pride will get us so badly. We'll build up everything so nice, so perfect, because we think it's about us. Right? And then the one who actually has the authority is like, oh, by the way, no, it's Mordecai. It's not you. It's Mordecai. That's what he needs. That's what he has to remember. He's like, man, I mean, think about it. How many of us, if we had the opportunities, let's be honest, we're prideful Haman right now. Okay? And the king says to us, what should you do to honor the man who deserves honor? How do you think we would have responded? Probably the exact same way. Okay? Because we thought it was about us. Okay? I'd have been going, oh my gosh, why does the king want me before him? Okay? And I find these verses interesting because you've got a prideful man. Puts a smile on my face. You have a prideful man who's going to have to eat his words. Okay? I mean, he is going to have to eat his words. Verses 10 and 11. Then the king said to Haman, quickly, take the robe and the horse, just as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fail to do anything of all that you have done. I bet he didn't go like this. King, could you repeat yourself? King, you got this right, King? Because I'm not quite sure I heard you properly, King. You're telling me I've got to honor this guy who I can't stand, who I built gallows for, and to have him killed? I bet you at this point, Haman's like, I better probably not go back before the king to have, I better rethink something here. But I think I find that verse, I find part of this verse funny because he's got to go around shouting, proclaiming to everybody how good Mordecai is. Okay, how good he is. And he's got to put him on the horse, put on the robe, put on the turban, all of these things. And he's got to go through like he's a
Town crier.
Yeah, there you go, town crier, exactly. Leading this guy through the streets, right? I mean, this is literally what we just witnessed. Okay, we could spend more time going theologically here, but I think we all get the picture here, don't we? Okay. So now it goes on. Verse 12. Oh, excuse me, verse 11. So Haman took the horse and dressed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him, so it shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor. I'm sorry, guys, but those are funny verses right there. Because that's a prideful man literally being a little bit lower, right? Just go ahead.
I wonder what Mordecai was thinking.
That's a good question. Right. Probably, I'm going to guess he was truly a humble man. But I'm sure, if we could read between the lines like you were saying, it'd be kind of interesting, wouldn't it?
He thinks the prayer and fasting worked.
Yeah, absolutely it did, right? Esther didn't die, and now now this is happening, and so all these things happen. But
You gotta rub it in.
But now, it'd be tempting to rub it in, wouldn't it? Right? Yes, Ron.
His character says he does not say anything directly about or to Mordecai.
Correct.
Haman.
Right.
Close. It's Haman with respect.
In fact, Ron, we'll never know because when this chapter's over, it goes right. The story just keeps on going. The whole plot just unravels right before Haman. But I just find those. I just can't help it. I find those verses funny. But verse 12. Again, he had to go around and he got himself into trouble because of his own words. I guess not really into trouble, but in a sense of having to be humbled. That was there, and so here we see this now. Verse 12. Verse 12 says this. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate while Haman hurried home, mourning with his head covered. Now, why does he need to cover his head?
Shame.
Shame. Right. I mean, think about it. I mean, unless you're his next door neighbor, I doubt that you know there's gallows hanging in his front yard for the man that he just walked around the city to hang on, right? Okay? And so as we think about this, this is something, that we need to remember here, is that he was getting ready to walk in to kill the kid, have the king give him permission to kill the man he just led through the city. Okay, I mean, you can't find anything funnier than that, guys. I'm just telling you right now. That is something that is there. So now verse 12, verse 13 says, and Haman informed Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends of everything that happened to me. I wonder if he embellished it any. Right? I wonder if he's like, can you believe the king did that to me? To me. Can you believe that he did this to me? Can you believe that he does such a thing? And that I don't deserve to be treated. I'm the one, come on. I find this interesting. Then it goes on. Okay? Then his wife, listen to this. Then his wise men, who said, build the gallows for the guy that you just walked around. I mean, they didn't know that at the time, but you walked around the city to honor, right? Okay? So he says, then the wise man Zeresh, his wife, said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you will not prevail over him, but will certainly fall before him. That's got to make him feel good. And I want to talk about the phrases that they used here. Okay? One of the things that I always find interesting is that many of God's enemies, if you will, they even understand the concept that if you're messing with God's people, you're going to lose. Did you pick up on that? You're going to lose. Right? And yet, for centuries, people still try to defeat God. And they can't. Okay? I mean, here he is. Can you imagine this? Think about that, Dave, okay? You just told me yesterday to build the gallows. Right? So I went out, had a gallows built, and now today you're like, you know what, if you're messing with God's people, that's probably a bad idea. Well, you should have told me that yesterday.
They followed the story.
Right.
They came out of Egypt and God destroyed Egypt.
Absolutely. They should have known these things.
Like, oh no, now you're in trouble.
Right. I mean, I'm finding these interesting here because he's going home. It's almost like he's trying to get their sympathy. Almost like how, you guys need to help me out here because, this is partially, this is partially your fault. This is partially your idea here. And all these things taking place. And they're like, you're doomed if you try to mess with God and his people. You're doomed messing with God's people. And so here they go. Now remember, what was his original intent to go before the king on this day? To kill Mordecai. That was his original intent. All right, now he is left in humiliation because he had to lead Mordecai around the city. All right, let's go on here. Verse 14 of chapter 6. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and quickly brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had approved. Do you think maybe his attitude might be a little bit different? You think that maybe he might be sitting there going, oh my gosh.
He's not so bold right now.
Yeah, he's not so bold now, is he? He's not so super. He's not so, I'm going to go in here. Because remember, this is the second banquet, right? This is the second banquet that they're going to come to. And they're going to do this. Now, how many of you ever had a bad day? Right? Okay. Haman's having a pretty bad day here, guys. This is what you know. He's having a pretty bad day. Okay? But remember this, guys. God's people are always protected by God. Now, we can do some really dumb things and get ourselves into trouble. But as I shared with you this morning, and the gates of hell shall not prevail. Because of who? Jesus Christ. Now, we're gonna go through here. We're going to go down to, we're going to look at a couple more things here that I want us to understand about this banquet. Okay? Okay, so now what we're going to see here is of this banquet taking place. The worst is going to be yet to come. What can you imagine this? We're just going to kind of, again, since we have the scriptures right here in front of us, can you imagine, what going through poor Haman's head as he goes into this second banquet? I'm going to stop right there, actually. What I want us to do here is I want us to to think about this. I want you to see this. Now, we have Haman, who has been plotting, and he's been trying to he's been trying to get rid of these guys because of his pride. And in chapter 3, we see his plot. We go to chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, and we only have from chapter 7, like the first. Let me get this right here. The first 6 verses, and Haman's gone. Haman's out of the picture after the 6 verses of chapter 7. Okay? And along with his pride. So and we're going to close right there tonight, but I want us to remember this. Let's be careful who we choose as our friends. Okay? Let's be careful with the pride that's in our life. Let's be careful with when we take advice from our friends, and it's a godly advice. Okay? Because it could potentially lead to death. I mean, it literally could lead to death. All right, we're going to close there. Please remember, we're going to continue looking through the last 2 books of the law on Wednesday night. Okay, we're going to look at Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. We're going to look at Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Okay, so please remember, we're going to look at those, and then we're going to continue to go through them. I think they're quite interesting, so hopefully that you guys can learn something from those too. So let's take a moment. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for the fact that you love us. Lord, I pray that our pride will always get out of the way, and the Lord will be faithful to you. Use us for your kingdom. Use us for your honor and for your glory. And give us strength, Lord, to be your people. Use us, Lord. Build your church. And I ask in your name. Amen.